I think. Yep, there it goes. Okay.
Yep. Boop. All right. This is Stephen Follett and Randy Galvin. Got long range studies here. And we thought we'd cover just really quickly how to get good information off of Facebook groups. I think everyone by now knows that Randy started Long Range Shooters, and I came on as a moderator and admin about a year ago. And so we've got a lot of time behind the computer answering questions on Facebook groups and moderating the questions and ultimately the answers. So we just hope this is helpful, especially for new shooters. I think Facebook is really the number one, or online is the number one source for new shooters simply because it's hard to find people local to you.
All right. Plus, everyone has Facebook, so it's a great place just to start finding other people to talk about shooting and anything else.
Yeah. So, and long range shooting just being so new, there's just a lot of questions, I think, for everybody. And the foundation that shooters are starting from are typically hunting or in the military shooting and understanding some basic ballistics and some basic things, but there's so many specific things that come into play in long range shooting that are completely foreign. I shot a lot and never really understood the use of a scope or the ballistics, or that you even dialed for a solution and things like that. Like, I knew you needed to hold up a little bit higher if you're shooting further out. But other than that, I needed more foundation. So what do you think the number one thing, the first thing that somebody's going to, that's going to ask a question of Facebook or try to get an answer, what do you think the first thing that would apply to someone that's going to ask a question in a group?
I mean, the first thing, whatever your question is, use the search function in the group. There's a good chance that whatever question you have, especially in the larger groups, somebody else has already asked that question. So use the search function, see if there's anything about it. I know the search function can be kind of a pain on Facebook sometimes. And use Google. Just kind of do a little bit of research on the question. Maybe you can't find exactly what answer you're looking for, or someone that'll break it down exactly what you want, but it'll give you a little bit more knowledge on what kind of questions to ask. And then the biggest thing is be detailed on your questions. Don't ask what's the best scope for my rifle and then leave it at that. If you're going to ask that, the search function, there's probably been quite a few questions about every scope that you're thinking of, but we need to know what you're planning on doing with your rifle, because if you want to shoot long range with a 22, or if you want to shoot PRS, those are going to be two completely different answers for what scope's best. Or if you want to shoot F-class or ELR, those are going to give you different answers. So we just need to know as much information as possible. So instead of saying, what's the best scope for my rifle, maybe phrase it as, hey, I'm getting ready to do this kind of shooting. I've got this kind of rifle, and my budget is this, because budget's also going to be a really big one when it comes to stuff like scopes, rifles, pretty much everything.
Yeah, what I find is there often is the question, what is the best of X, Y, or Z, whether it's the scope, whether it's the rifle, whether it's a cartridge, whether it's a stock, those types of things. It's like asking what's the best car, right? It's going to depend upon your purpose. What are your goals? What's your intent? What's your use? What's your budget? All of those things.
And then personal preference comes into it a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might like a specific type of reticle, and if you know you want that style of reticle, that could limit you to what types of scopes you can get, stuff like that. Because what's best for me might not be best for somebody else. So what's best really isn't a good question to ask.
Precisely. Because it's all going to vary. I know that for instance, I like a caliber that's going to not really be hard on a barrel. But then that depends, because I'm running a hard, 6mm bullet. But when I made my choice, I still made a choice based upon I'm not going to be, looking for the fastest one to burn out a barrel and to do those things. So it's the personal preference and what are we looking for, and what are you wanting to do. And so that's actually a great question as well, right? Is to say, I'm looking at, for instance, a 6mm. I hear that 6mm is good. Help me understand what's available and what the pluses and minuses are of each, and talk about where you are in that process. Where are you in the process of deciding? What are the things that are important to you, and go from there.
Yeah, and really just the more information about whatever the topic is, and it really doesn't matter. I know we've mentioned scopes and calibers and stuff, but it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Just the more detail you can put into the question, the better everyone's gonna be able to answer you.
Yeah, and as you formulate your question, you don't know what you don't know. And it's a little harsh. It feels a little harsh from my perspective, sometimes saying, well, that's not even a very good question. Or what do you mean by that? So sometimes try to figure out what you don't know and ask the questions about those. Rather than what's the best scope, ask the question, what should I look for in a scope? Or what are the options in a scope? Or why do you like this scope? To be able to begin to flesh those things out. That kind of comes down to the age-old 308 versus 6.5 Creedmoor discussion that happens all the time. Is which one should I buy? You know what? They're both great. It just completely depends upon your goals and what you want and how far you shoot. Because there's honestly some people at some ranges that they have accessible that it's not going to make a lick of difference whether you use 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor. As far as ballistically, it's gonna depend upon all those other factors. So apply where you are in the process and indicate what do you know, what do you have, what do you like, and go from there, so that the people giving advice have a basis to do it. Because otherwise you're going to get vague advice.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where it kind of comes down also to what you're going to use it for. Because people are going to give you the advice. If you don't specify, they're going to naturally turn towards giving you advice for what type of sport they do. So if you're in a group where they specialize in PRS, they're going to start telling you all kinds of stuff that works great for PRS. But if you're looking at starting doing F class and you don't specify it, the stuff I use in PRS is completely different than what you would use in F class or what you would use in bench rest shooting.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that describes it well. Is where are you? What are you going to be doing with it? And if you ask a general question, then you're going to get that person's responses. The question of what's the best scope, you're going to get guys that say the best scope is the lower tier of Vortex and Athlon. And they'll say it's great glass and it's so much better, and it's anybody who spends more isn't really getting it. And you'll also have the people that say, oh no, if you don't spend $3,000 for the best Hensoldt glass or the Nightforce Beast or Attacker or a Schmidt and Bender, if it's not shot glass or German glass, you're going to get all sorts of those answers. But the reality is, depending upon what you want, you may go with that low tier scope,
Right. And
and
that's
fine. If that's your budget, then that's your budget, and that's fine. And people can talk you through, hey, these are the pros and cons. Uh, Given a budget, this is the quote unquote best. But again, it's interesting that once you get into a rifle and you're talking about rifles within tiers or scopes within tiers, at that point, all you're really going to be talking about is going to be principally the functions, the characteristics,
Yeah, and personal preference comes
level.
into a lot of it for that too. Because really, most scopes in a certain price range are all about fairly close to equal.
Yeah, if you're going to pay between $1,500 and $1,800, and you might widen out a little bit, but the glass is all going to be very clear.
Yeah.
You're
And
not
very similar to each other. There's
very similar. You're not going to have big swings in quality. There will be swings and differences in the glass. One might be better at one particular color or color band, or you might have a different type of coating that makes it look different. And so the quality of the light that you shoot in, and even your own eyes, how they see, are going to determine whether you like a glass or not, or whether it's clear to you. There's also so many variables that the glass companies, it's always a give and take, whether they give up clarity along the edges, right, for a type of finish or clarity that you get in the middle. You might have more clarity, but you start to get the color aberrations and you get the color bleed. You see more purple or you see more yellow. And so that's where so much of it is personal preference. And so it's good to ask why somebody says it's the best.
right. And that goes into your details of what you're going to be using it for too, because me and Steven shooting PRS during the middle of the day are less concerned with how well it works in low light conditions versus if Steven's out hunting early morning or right at dusk, and that'll make a big difference too. So that's a big one. Another thing that I tend to see a lot on questions are really simple questions that could be answered with a 2-minute Google search. Like you'll see people ask, "What's the difference between a Savage 10 and a Savage Model 12?"
No difference primarily, but
right.
Yeah.
But that's something that's incredibly easy to research yourself. So asking questions like that's really kind of opening yourself up to people trolling your post or getting smart ass answers, stuff like that.
Yeah. And if you're taking the time, but sometimes it is a little bit confusing. And I had those same questions about Savages as well. And it's not entirely clear all the time. There are some variations, but you should be able to ask, hey, I looked and I understand that there's this and that there's this and that there's this variation, and I'm confused on this one. It's easier to help someone out and feel like you want to answer that question by giving that than just what's the difference between, is there a difference between this, right? And specifically on the Savages, I know that because I shot them and worked on them and did them, is I typically like to answer those because I know how frustrating, but recently I found myself saying, I've answered this so many times that it doesn't appear that they've done the work. And so lots of people that know then aren't as willing to answer a question and type out a detailed response if your question hasn't shown kind of the basics of research. Maybe you have done it, but kind of include that information.
Right, because if someone has done research and they say they've done the research and what research they've done, I think that makes a big difference, just like you were saying, on the kind of responses you're going to get. Because people are a lot more willing to help you if you've kind of done at least the basics for yourself. If you can't find the answer to something, even if it is a simple question, and you honestly can't find it and you say that, I think a lot more people are going to be willing to help and get you better information.
Yeah, just be as specific as you can and explain what you've done because you want to encourage people to answer your question. And you'll get more responses if with more information. You'll get more responses and you'll get better information. I suppose that's the thing. I don't know how many times we've seen a question and people have started answering it and they've gone down those things that would make sense. And then the person says, oh, I want it for this purpose and I don't care about that. It would have been helpful to know that from the outset.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. I'm never going to shoot at a range past 500 yards. And we've been talking about, whatever the case might be, ballistics or velocity or anything else.
Or even scopes at that point.
Scopes, and it doesn't matter. And it wouldn't have mattered to be able to respond or answer the question. Another big question is rangefinders, right? Well, what do you intend to do with the rangefinder? Are you at a range where it's a static range and you really never need to range beyond 1,000 yards? Are you in, the Midwest or the South or
right? Where I live in Florida, you're very rarely going to out hunting in field conditions. You're rarely going to get anything past 100, maybe 200 yards. Most stuff's pretty much point blank range.
Yeah, and so are you at a range? Are you at matches? Are you on a farmer, on a field, a farm? Where are you ranging and how far are you ranging? Are you ranging static targets? Are you ranging for hunting?
Right, and what are you trying to range?
What are you trying to range? Yeah. What are the conditions and what do you want from it? Do you want a rangefinder that provides the angle, that provides the ballistic solutions? Those are all different things that come up, and it's just interesting the experiences that people say, oh, my rangefinder ranges out and does this, and then because then when you're specific, you'll get better answers.
Yeah.
Because just in talking about rangefinders just recently, I had a SIG 2200 and a Nikon Black 4K, and I'm able to compare those. And someone, and it came down to they didn't care whether it gave the angle or not. And so at that point, I was able to say, well, then the Nikon, in my experience, is going to be able to range further. And knowing where you're going to range and what conditions makes a big difference. Because if I'm able to say, if you ask the question, I'm able to say, well, here in Arizona in the bright sun with dusty haze, I can range, soft natural targets out to, 1,700 yards. That's going to be a significant thing for you versus someone in higher humidity at shorter ranges.
Yeah.
Those things do matter. And so the context, you'll be able to get guys who have been in your situation more specifically. And that's another one is, where are you? What do you have available to you?
Right, because that's a huge difference. I know for even matches at the matches you do in Arizona, aren't there usually stages out to 1,200, 1,400 yards? At least one or two stages.
At our current range, we have about 1,000.
Okay.
There's one target at 1,000.
Okay, yeah, because where I'm at, a lot of the ranges don't have anything past 800. Yeah. So that'll make a difference. So that kind of helps to know what you're doing. Another thing that we see in Facebook groups a lot is when people are responding to questions, they might.
Next topic, right?
Yeah, almost a whole nother topic, but it kind of flows into this one too, I think. Where you'll tell someone a definitive answer based on your limited experience on something. So you might get someone who has Vortex Viper or an Athlon scope that says, you should buy this scope. It's the best glass you can get. It's great glass quality, but they don't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing we see in Facebook groups. Kind of stick with your knowledge base.
Yeah, and don't make such broad characteristics. Broad statements. Don't say this particular scope is the best glass, or this is the best scope,
or best caliber, or best rifle, any of it.
Yeah, and because it's going to be based upon your experience, what you want, and what you're doing with it. So that's helpful if you say, I think this is the best Coyote caliber because X, Y, and Z. If you provide the basis why, then that's fantastic. But don't just leave it at this is the best. And don't say this is the best, and anybody else that says that a more expensive scope is necessary is a scope snob. That's not helpful either, because now you're comparing what you like versus what someone else likes.
Right.
And leave all that behind. What do you know and how do you know it?
Yep. And honestly, that's been a big issue we've seen over the years in Facebook. There's a lot of industry professionals who have a ton of experience that kind of don't post as much anymore as they used to, because you'll get these guys who have a cheap like Ruger Precision rifle or Bergara. Both good rifles, don't get me wrong, but you'll get people who that's the only experience they've got with, like, either a Vortex, Athlon scope, something like that, saying that that's the best possible setup, and arguing with guys who build custom rifles for a living, who have world records, because you don't know who the people you're talking to on Facebook are, and you'll get people who you can tell have very little experience arguing with guys who have been there, done that, have the world records.
Yeah. And so, and other people who are just flat out guessing, if you have to guess at an answer, then explicitly state, I think this might be the answer. What about this, as a question mark? It's okay in that conversation to do that, but don't state something as an absolute.
Right.
Because frankly, there really are no absolutes in the world. It's just not that way. So don't state those types of things. I mean, there are absolutes. Math and ballistics and physics, they can provide us from absolutes, but even then, the way they're usually stated, there's a little bit more. So as you're asking the questions, I guess that's a warning, is take the short answers to your questions with a grain of salt, and wait. And if someone says it's the best, then ask them why. What's the basis? What's the information that you have based on that?
Yeah, and don't try and answer questions if it's not something you're very familiar with. If there's something that you kind of think you might know the answer to, it's probably better not to necessarily say something unless you absolutely 100% fact know the answer.
Yeah.
And then if you get called out for saying something that's wrong, own up to it instead of continuing to argue. I've seen quite a few people do that recently, and pretty much the entire time I've been doing Facebook groups, where they will continue to argue even when people are showing them facts.
Yeah.
Because
what's the numbers? What's the hard information that's going to help you make your decision? So I think in summary, I've got to run, but I'm glad that we covered this. and Randy, you've had a lot of good points, but I went down and just thought of the things, and number one was be specific. Have you researched and eliminated something? Are you new to it? You know, what do you know? Help people understand that. But before you ask a question, definitely use the search feature. Go through Google. And I get that there's a lot of confusing things out there, and there's a lot of misinformation and wrong stuff out on Facebook and Google. But do some due diligence so that you can ask a smart, intelligent question. And that'll get you better answers, and it'll help the people answer you. And so as you're formulating your question, the other things are, what are your objectives, and what's your budget? You'll get a lot of answers right off the bat if you say, you know, my budget's $600. What can I buy for a scope? People are going to give you legitimate answers based upon $600. But if you just say, what scope should I get? You're immediately going to get lots of recommendations within the $1,000 to $1,200 range,
and well above that as well,
and above that. But you'll get more in that middle range because that's where more people are with finances. But again, and because the people that know that bracket is a bracket where you get a quality scope, and for all the other reasons. But you're going to get information that's wide open, and that will not apply to you. So what's your objective? What's your budget? But definitely ask the questions. And what I do notice is people who post thoughtful, intelligent questions, they get responses from, like you said, the professionals in the industry.
Yep.
They're willing to answer genuine questions where there's been some forethought and requests.
Yeah. And people would be amazed at who are actually in these Facebook groups. Like, it is the top people in all the shooting disciplines, all the manufacturers. Like, it's a lot of really good people in the groups.
Yeah.
With a lot of information.
Some of the admin in our group are some of the best precision rifle makers in the industry. They work with and rub shoulders with and are top shooters. And they're willing to help. They're willing to spend time because they want to grow the sport, but they grow tired because their time is valuable, right? Much more valuable than yours and my time, right? Because we're doing these videos. But seriously, they want to grow the sport, and like Mark, he placed second in the extreme tough man competition with at the Mammoth Sniper Challenge.
Yep.
I mean, that's huge. You've got a guy like that willing to spend his time. I mean, he's a generous, kind guy, but he doesn't cotton bad information or stupid questions. But he will answer good questions, and especially if I know, because you know him better than I do, but if we tag him in a post where he has specific knowledge and expertise, then he'll answer that.
Oh yeah, and I do that all the time, because there will be stuff that I don't know well enough to be willing to put an answer forward. Kind of like I was talking about, be an expert when you answer something, and I'll tag the guys who do a lot more of that particular thing than I do.
Yeah, and there's people that are representatives for everything. There are sponsored shooters, and there's in our group,
and there's the guys who do the sponsoring.
That do the sponsoring, right? They are the Lapua Berger reps. They are the ones working directly with those companies to try to get the information out. So they want to answer those questions, but they're not going to engage unless it's valuable to them and to their company. But imagine asking an intelligent question about Berger bullets and getting one of the representatives for Berger bullets to answer the question, and they will do that. It can be something as simple as Magneto speed. Ryan is great to help answer those questions.
Oh yeah, there's pretty much any top company especially that has to do with PRS. Probably the owners or high level management are in all of the big long range Facebook groups, not just ours.
So if you want to approach it that way and you want to learn and you're genuine and it shows, then you will get more encouragement from top shooters and companies than you really know what to do with. And a lot of times what will happen is they'll say, hey, I don't want to answer that question online, and they'll answer your question and address it offline just simply because of the sensitivity of the topic, and they don't want to give specific information that other people might rely on out of context. And certainly I know that I'm willing to do that, and people say, message me and say, because they know I have nucleus actions, right? Hey, I understand you have a nucleus. This is a problem I'm having, or what do you think about this? And it's interesting going through the process. So if you're on the Facebook groups, then definitely jump on lots of them. You'll see people who are posting and have authority, and join them and participate in the conversation. And if you do know something, share. Say, hey, this is my experience.
Yeah, because honestly, all of the long-range Facebook groups, with one exception, work pretty well together and share. I mean, the members of one group are probably in all the other ones.
Yeah.
So.
No, I find myself learning in lots of Facebook groups with the different long-range shooting. And again, just going back to the name of our podcast, Long Range Studies, neither you or I nor I are going to say that we're an expert in, necessarily any one particular thing. I think that there's things that I can say that I know, but I'm aware of my limitations, and I'll call in the big guns if there's a specific question that I have. But the things that I do know are things that I know and I've learned and I've understood. But we're still studying, and we're still learning.
Everyone is. No one, especially top shooters, will ever say they know everything. They are always willing to learn a new technique, try new equipment, try something they haven't seen before. They'll give it a try if it looks like it makes sense and it's helping people.
Yeah. So I think as we get long range shooters and we're on the internet, just to remember those things, and we'll have productive groups. I benefit a lot when intelligent questions are asked and I don't necessarily know all the answers. And that has helped me progress a lot. And I know when I first came into the group, just joined as a member, I thought I knew some things, right? I thought I knew about the effect of gravity and shooting at angles and things like that. So I posted a pretty lengthy but detailed question saying, hey, this is what I understand. And it was super helpful to me because Frank Galley of Sniper Sight answered me. And he's like, no, you're close, but this is the difference. And it was a short answer, and he put a link to something he had written before. But I had Frank, right, helping me understand something, which is huge. I mean, that's just huge. And he doesn't post a whole lot. He hasn't posted for a while, but I know people have tagged him and he's provided things. But I thought that was awesome that Frank took the time to answer me, but in part was because I had an in-depth question and it showed that I tried to learn, and he saw it as an opportunity not only to help me, but also to help other people. I think that's probably where these industry professionals jump in the most, is where they see an opportunity to answer lots of questions at once.
Yeah, and the other thing you might see when you post a long, detailed question, you might actually get less answers, but you'll get more quality answers.
Yes.
If that makes sense. So you might not get 20 people giving you 1 or 2 lines for an answer, but you might get 2 or 3 people writing you a fairly long, paragraph-sized, detailed answer that will answer your question a lot better.
Yeah. So I think that's where it's at. So again, just be as specific as you can, do your due diligence, and make sure you explain what your objectives are. What are you trying to learn? What's your budget? And go from there. And I think you'll invite a lot of good discussion and be able to pick up and learn a lot and advance your knowledge. Nothing beats trigger time except smart trigger time.
Yep. Yeah, because you can, if you're doing something wrong, you can do more damage than if you're not.
Correcting my bad habits has taken more effort than learning the good habits from the beginning.
Yep.
And just keep going and follow the experts. Listen to the experts. You know, people like Philip Valayo and Kalen. I don't know I can't say his last. Vic or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know how to say his last name.
But yeah, I mean,
I know who you're talking about though.
The guy's great. I was just listening to a podcast today, so I think everybody's constantly learning. And the interesting thing is, I think even those guys will admit that they're watching other people and learning as well.
Oh, absolutely. If every one of the top shooters are, you don't become the top shooter by thinking you know everything.
Yeah.
You become a top shooter.
Yeah.
By seeing what everyone else is doing and what works.
Yeah. So approach Facebook the same way, and you'll be able to improve your game and improve your shooting and knowledge and the fundamentals all the way through. So, absolutely. All right. Thanks, Randy. I think we probably spent more time than we expected on this topic. But...
Probably. Although I do have one more thing I do want to say. It's kind of, probably should have mentioned it earlier, but I just thought about it. One of my pet peeves for a post in any group, and we don't see it as much in long range, but we still see it. Don't buy something and post that you bought it and ask if it's any good after you buy it.
Yeah.
Ask that before you buy something if it's any good.
I will let those slide if they say, I got this for, some obscenely small amount of money. What did I get? Help me understand. And
right, that I totally get. I'm talking to the guys who are like, hey, I just bought a brand new whatever rifle, with whatever scope. Is that a good combination?
Yeah, I bought a new I bought a new not to pick on anybody, but a Savage, 10 BA and 308. Is this any good? Well, the time to ask that question was before you bought it. But yeah, it's an okay gun. But I guess don't post that looking for affirmations.
Yeah, and that's what it seems like. It's just, please confirm that I didn't waste my money. Ask us before you buy it, unless it's something that, I mean, if you find a brand new rifle 80% off and you can get it for like $100, sure, I got it.
Go for it.
But yeah, don't buy.
Yeah, if you do have a new rifle, say, hey, who has one? What's your experience? What have you done to improve it? Those are great questions too.
Yeah, but be a little more specific with it. Don't just be like, and we see this one a lot. Whatever it is, who has this rifle? What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to delete your question before it gets posted on our group. I know other groups will do the same thing. Some people might approve that, but ask a specific question about it.
I'm a little bit more forgiving, much more forgiving than you, Randy. You're pretty harsh on that, but yeah. I'll accept people that they're trying their best and try to help them build something out of it. But yeah, if you're finding your posts are deleted, it's because they're too general. You're trying to sell something, or it's just clutter.
Or another one that I've seen a couple of recently. I don't think you should ask for load data on Facebook, period, anywhere. Use reloading manuals. But I've seen people ask, hey, what's a good load data for a 6mm? That's all they said. Didn't say what kind of 6mm.
Need to be a little bit more specific, right?
Because if I give you because if you're shooting, I don't know what you're shooting. Say you're shooting a 6BR, and I'm like, oh, use this load data from my 6 Creedmoor or my 6 Salem. Yeah. It's not going to work out well for you.
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to seat your bullet because there's too much powder.
Yeah. Right? So we have to know stuff like that. And that, I mean, that kind of goes back to our thing about be detailed with your questions.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to run.
Alrighty.
And we'll catch up, do another one later this week, I think.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
be posting some of the videos on the that we didn't do live at SHOT Show. So we've got some videos from some great companies doing some good explanations and some reviews, and I think that'll be of interest. There's been a lot of similar videos, but I think I've always gotten a little bit different thing out of each one, depending upon the person and the time they're explaining it. So you'll be seeing them coming up soon.
Yeah, and some of them will go hand in hand with our live videos, but a lot more in depth.
Yeah. So. No, absolutely. Yeah, we did do a couple of where we did a short live video just to get something up, and then we got a more in-depth one. So, all right. We'll see you later.
Yep. Have a good night, buddy.
Will do.